Hello, Yakri here with another Dominions 5 video. This time we are going through level 4, 5, and 6 Thaumaturgy spells. Alright, so we've got Prison of Fire at level 4. Prison of Fire is reasonably good. It's like Bonds of Fire, but actually useful because it hits an area effect 3+ of units. Now, it's Fire 3, so it's kind of hard to get a Fire Mage with more than Fire 3, right? But if you have access to one, hitting 4 or 5 squares of units, this is the tier where it becomes actually quite handy to cast several times. For a Fire base 3 mage, you could cast Summon Phoenix Power and then cast this 4 times, and you're going to get actually pretty good value out of it because you're going to be hitting 4 squares per cast, and the casts are going to not cost you too much fatigue. I'm not sure there's any nations that have access to that and also to research Thaumaturgy, which is unfortunate because like rooting units or any sort of like webbing units type effect is quite powerful actually, and Bonds of Fire can do good damage or kill human-sized troops. Okay, Auspex. I can't pronounce that correctly. Auspex. This is the magic places searching, right? So this is an air site searching spell. I mentioned site searching spells before. This is the air version for yes, this is the air version. It's going to search a province you target at air 9. Reasonably good if you need to try and uncover more air gems, especially if you say only have access to one air 2 mage or something that you got through some odd event. Although your access to air gems might be a little limited in that case, but such is life. Curse of the Desert. So yeah, dehydration. The whole dehydration thing is kind of nifty. The problem with this is that, of course, units with high magic resistance will resist it more, and those are the types of units that you usually want to use dehydration against, right? Because elite troops are the kind of troops that you want to hit with fatigue spells. However, this is Area of Effect 5, which is actually pretty good for Water 3. So I'd say overall, this is a fairly medium choice spell. There are perhaps better things you could do with your water mages, but if you also had a reason to research Thaumaturgy and thus have access to it, it is a very good debuff. At least on like human troops. Elves, for example, and troop types that have naturally high magic resistance, especially like something like Furbolgs, where the troops have higher than normal magic resistance and are not heavily armored, it's not going to be very effective against, right? Okay, so no more. This is the Earth Site Searching spell, right? Yes. Yep, this is the Earth Site Searching spell. Same as for other Site Searching spells, but Earth. They also vary in cost. Like Air is 2 gems, Earth is 3 gems. So like Auspex is a little bit on the better side of the Site Searching spells. Only 2 gems is fairly cheap, but this is, I mean, it's still only 3 gems, but since you're gambling kind of whether or not you're going to find a site, it can end up being quite expensive if you have to cast this 5 times to find one site. It's going to be 15 gems versus 10 gems to find a site, right? Yeah. Okay, so Paralyze. Paralyze is pretty good. It only hits 1 person. This is a little bit closer to a good anti-thug spell, right? Of course, magic resistance negates, that's a big problem. However, Paralyze completely disables someone, allowing them to be hacked apart by regular old, pathetic infantry. So, especially if there's only 1 person on the battlefield and you have several mages spamming this, and since it hits every time, you have good odds of eventually penetrating their magic resistance and doing a lot of damage. It's not very good as far as things you can spam with Thaumaturgy if you're not trying to take out a thug or something, though, right? If you're fighting human troops, instead of Paralyze, you could be casting Mind Burn, and Mind Burn is gonna, a lot of the time, when Paralyze would paralyze someone, Mind Burn will instead kill the same unit, right, outright. So you'd rather cast that. This is an assassination spell, as I recall, right? So this is interesting. What it does is exactly what it says it does, right? It causes an assassination event to take place, targeting a commander in a province, right? So you target a province, and suppose there's only 1 commander in there, and he's a thug, and he's killed like hundreds of units. It'll actually, I don't know if I can fill a whole battlefield, but it will actually populate the assassination encounter with the units that the thug has killed. So one of the kind of more neat dwarf fortressy things that this game does, I would have to say. Alright, so this is where fear spamming gets really nice, right? Area of effect 5, only 10 fatigue. This is brutal as far as fear spells go. And it's at level 4 Thaumaturgy, it's actually relatively easy as far as research targets go. So, perhaps not as big of a target, I would say, as something like Horde of Skeletons, but it's easier to reach anyway. And yeah, I mean, this is a really great counter to, say, War Elephants, if you need to counter War Elephants and you have access to Death Magic. Since they have poor magic resistance, being animals, I think they qualify as animal troops. Does it even have a magic resist check attached to it? It might not, actually. Well, they have like 8 morale, so yeah. Well, hordes of troops with poor morale, elephants, especially good versus elephants. Overall, quite a good option if you want to try and rout enemy troops. Touch of Madness is okay. The area of effect only being 1 is kind of bad. The nice thing about this is if you can target your own elite units. You can't, as someone pointed out to me, you can't make cavalry go berserk. I was trying to make cavalry go berserk at one point, but you can't do it, and elephants count as cavalry, which is unfortunate, because that would be pretty great for the spell. So that's too bad, but there are a lot of units where you could potentially utilize this to make units go berserk, especially, for example, units that have trample and perhaps poor morale, and you want them to just, you know, keep slaughtering through the enemy lines until they die. But yeah, pretty much any sort of troop where, how to put it, it's relatively elite, like it's got a lot of HP, it's got trample or something, and you want to just suicide bomber it in there, right? So that's what that's for. Probably not good enough AoE to have a lot of applications with only AoE 1 though. So Rage of the Cornered Rat, same thing, but a good area of effect, and I think it's the same thing. I believe this targets allies. It's the same thing, except it only targets animals. So you can target your monkey troops with it. I haven't had a case where I thought it would be useful to use in the game before. Not a huge fan of it. This is one of the reasons that being an animal, having the animal tag is really bad. If you're playing a monkey nation, this wildness, this is only nature 3, and it targets your entire army, right? Any unit with the animal tag is going to be affected by this. And they also have poor magic resistance because they're animals. So you really don't want to be an animal in Dominions 5. It could end very badly for you. This is actually pretty nice. Cure unit from disease. Doing this is mostly not going to be useful, right? It costs a lot of gems. However, you can set up a situation like this. Suppose your pretender gets diseased. It's the same province as the caster. Yeah, suppose your pretender gets diseased. What you do is you move your pretender and a mage to a castle by themselves, and you cast the spell, and it will cure disease from your pretender, whereas otherwise your pretender would inevitably die. You could get similar value out of curing a mage with really good paths, roll-wise, like on a random path chance, or to save, say, a hero unit or something that was of particular usefulness to you. Outside of that, it's probably not worth 5 gems to save a unit, usually. Pyre of Catharsis. I don't remember this one. Might be. I'm not sure this is actually new, but it might be. The Devas, the wicked Myros, no longer controls purifying flames. Blah blah blah. You set yourself ablaze. Oh, okay. So it cure your own diseases if you're a fire mage, but you're gonna be horribly burned, huh? That's kind of cool though. I like that. I think that's new. Pretty sure. Let's see. Fury in the Hearts. Oh, this causes the province to riot, and they lose population. I think I've talked about these type of spells a lot of times before. Basic rundown is for like destroy enemy population, cause unrest type spells. Typically, now there's some nations that benefit from unrest, right? And you could use that to your advantage, right? When you're attacking into a province. But typically, you want to like not use these or kind of spam them and destroy someone's province, like their capital. Like if it kills population and generates unrest, and you drop like 5 mages cast out on someone's capital in a turn, they're suddenly going to have so much unrest they can no longer recruit mages, and they'll lose like most of the income from the capital. Hugely effective. If you just drop it one at a time, they'll probably patrol away the unrest. They'll lose some income, but it won't be nearly as effective if you don't like concentrate your efforts, right? Okay. Confusion, causing us to attack friends instead of allies. Only area of effect 1, not a huge fan of it. There is the fact that it is only 10 fatigue, so it's easy to spam. I can't see a case where you use it. It's kind of two reasons. One is it's a little ineffective, and it's this kind of thing where like, okay, I could still see using it if you were desperate, but if you have Air 3 mages, why have you gone to Thaumaturgy 5? If you look at my screen right now, you may notice there's only one air effect here. If I scroll back up, we've got 2, and one of them is a sight searching spell. Because there's not too many cool things in Thaumaturgy for air. Dark Skies is pretty good, but yeah, so a bit hard to get yourself in the situation where this is your best option in the first place, okay? In addition to it being a little on the weak side. Soulslay. Soulslay is very powerful for a variety of reasons. So for one, it's simply powerful because you can cast it and take out an enemy unit in the enemy army. The fatigue cost is only 20. A lot of the time you're going to get like 4, 5, 6 spell casts in a battle of this spell. So that's pretty good, right? Like taking out 5 or 6 units with your mage is actually okay. It's not great if they're like 10 gold militia, but still, it's pretty good if your mages then survive the battle and go on to do it for 2 or 3 battles, which you can do if you don't, lose. So the really nice thing about Soulslay is that's not the only thing it's good for. If you have to deal with elite enemy units, they're going to have HP in a range that Mindburn can't deal with, like giants, right? If you have to deal with giants, if you have to deal with magic beings, if you have to deal with sacred units, of course they get a magic resist check, and a lot of more elite units will have okay magic resist checks, but if they fail, they instantly die, right? And this gets around a lot of protective abilities and stuff, and so it's very effective for that reason. Now another thing is that for very high magic resist units, they'll have a very high chance of passing the check and not dying. However, as soon as they fail, boom, dead. All right, so this is for example, I killed a Tartarian thug that had like, those are expensive to summon. They had to have Gift of Health up. They spent a ton of gems on equipment for it, had every slot filled. I killed it using Soulslay. It took me 20 Astral Mages spamming Soulslay on it, and it almost got to the lines before, it almost got to them and killed its way through a decent amount of troops before, like around 4 or 5, when Soulslay finally got through, right? However, versus a lot of nigh unstoppable units, Soulslay will stop them as long as you generate enough checks, so eventually they get a critical failure. And it's going to be very valuable for that reason, because there's not many other options that do the same thing. Although there are a few other spells that are basically Soulslay for another magic school, okay? I think I've mentioned spells like that in some of my other videos, like Liquefy Bones or something is similar. I think there's a spell for death magic that does it to undead or something. Oh, there's in here, actually. There's a spell, actually it might be an alteration for death magic that just like it vaporizes someone, right? So that's the similar spell there. Let's see. Great priestly powers, but is immobile. Okay, this is like okay-ish, right? It creates a priest statue for 5 astral pearls that's immobile. This is good if, like, for example, suppose that you're getting really heavily dom pushed. This isn't going to happen to you very often, but if you, for example, took a build where you only have 4 Dominion or something a little bit on the, like, risque side like that, you could cast this spell in border forts and have it preach to improve your Dominion. And it's pretty useful for that purpose. It's niche, but, good. Let's see. Teleport you and troops through your command to a province. This is just teleport that brings any troops you're leading with you. This is super good. And this is one of the reasons why you might actually craft some of those plus leadership, magic items in construction, right? Because if you have mages that are astral mages and they have like maybe 40 leadership, because often mages don't have the best leadership, Well, what if you drop 2 or 3 items on them to enhance their leadership? Now they can lead like 150 troops. Well, that is a substantial amount of troops that could take a fairly well-fortified province, maybe fight an enemy army, and now you can take those troops and just teleport them somewhere, right? And that basically makes the gems you're going to spend on Gateway more efficient, right, if you do that. Mobility like this is, of course, incredibly useful to teleport 6 provinces. It's insanely good. You know, I haven't actually ever used it in a game myself, but probably because of my nation choices. But it is absolutely possible to find uses like this. I've done similar things without bringing troops by just teleporting a bunch of thugs to provinces, and it's quite effective. You can win games that way. The surprise factor is very useful potentially. More so if you have priest 3s that you can also get to those provinces somehow by like giving them stealth items or something. Okay, take control of some undead in area of effect. It's all right. I prefer dust to dust. Just kill the undead because this has a magic resist check, and it only affects 1 square. I think it's higher requirement too, right? Oh no, it's not. I guess it could be. It could be better than Dust to Dust against Long Dead, because I think Dust to Dust is still area of effect 1, and if you're spamming this and you succeed, those undead will then fight the undead around them, and it essentially does destroy them while distracting the enemy army, so that's not too bad. Leeching Darkness, this creates like Fire Cloud or something, but it does, there isn't actually damage types. It does armor piercing magic resist negates damage that's not fire. I think there are damage types, but this doesn't have a type. Right. Excuse me. I totally got that wrong. And it lingers for a little bit, and that's all there is to it. It's pretty good. I mean, armor piercing 6 damage is okay. It's an unusual spell for death magic, right? That's the kind of neat thing about it. It's something that you don't get a lot of similar stuff to in death magic, whereas you know, it's like a direct evocation that kills units in an area by causing them to take damage, right? Death magic is more around stuff like terror and horde of skeletons, so it's kind of like it's a good option if you need, you know, damage directly somehow. For example, killing a bunch of militia, that's a pretty effective spell because it's what, AoE 3+, right? That's pretty good. Alright, Burden of Time. This is a really powerful and like meta-shaping type of spell, right? So Burden of Time causes everyone in the world to age really quickly. So this is a big problem for living human nations and other nations who have troops that live like a relatively normal span of years, because especially if you have troops that are like on the edge of being old aged, they'll quickly age up into old age, and that's a big problem for you. Additionally, I believe there's like an actual thing where like some population and troops die each year or become diseased. Essentially, it's a huge penalty to all non-undead nations, right? So it's often a goal for, say, Middle Airmore to cast this spell. And this is a big reason why people want to kill Middle Airmore in the early game before they can do something like this, right? Because it's a huge penalty to every other nation except Airmore, pretty much. Yeah, so I don't know if there's that much more to cover on this. It's if you're undead nation, it's extremely powerful. And you definitely do want to cast it. And if you're not an undead nation, you should kill the nations that can realistically cast that spell and not suffer as much as you before they can do it. Oh, Charm Animal. So, 1-person charm. Not a fan. Magic resist negates. You could potentially spam this against like an animal thug if someone had one. I don't know. I guess you could say versus an animal thug, this is basically Soul Slay spam. All right, yeah, that's pretty much true. Otherwise, not a super huge fan. Now this is the one that yes, Ravenous Swarm. This is more underwhelming than it sounds like. I had some really big problems fighting major undead battles versus undead, and I tried this out, and it kills undead per turn, basically. But the thing is, if someone brings like a 3,000 strong undead army, it's mostly like getting rid of a few shitty long dead each turn, and a fireball would be way more effective than like several turns of this spell, usually. So I'm not a big fan. Not a big fan. Unless something has changed that I don't know about, or I just had poor luck, I would say this spell is pretty weak overall and likely not worth casting. all friendly units gain Berserk. So as long as you want to fight a battle to the death, this is a great spell. If you are dealing with something like Vengeful Skies or Dark Skies, there's this one air death spell that causes huge amounts of morale penalties to your units if your opponent casts it, and stuff like terror spam, or you just have like morale problems already, or the enemy has fear aura units. This is your solution. Going Berserk just lets you blow past those issues. It'll also let you ignore awe. So yeah, this is great if you have a reason to use it. Of course, keep in mind you can cause your mages to go Berserk, and I think there's a magic resist check too. I think that's a magic resist check to prevent it, but making your mages go Berserk accidentally, if they like take a little bit of damage or something, is not good. So keep that in mind. Okay, so Gift of Reason. I almost want to like make a separate video about Gift of Reason. There are a lot of units in the game that will have magic paths if you suddenly make them a commander, and that's what this spell does. There are a lot of niche strategies that revolve around Gift of Reasoning certain types of units that are good thugs if you use Gift of Reason on them usually. And in particular Tartarians, which are these like undead titans from Tartarus, that you bring them back from the dead, and they're insane, and they're also units, not commanders. So if you want to they're really powerful mages that have really great thug chassis. But if you want to make them into thugs, first you need to cast something like Gift of Reason on them, and that makes them commanders, and they can act on their own. And then they have a ton of afflictions that you need to cure using Gift of Health, because there's nothing else that'll affect them for curing their afflictions. Right, and the Gift of Health is a global enchantment that is really powerful. I believe I covered it in one of my past videos. It causes all of your units in your dominion to heal afflictions every turn, potentially. All right, on to level 6. Melancholia. This is another one of those. Holders will desert. Okay, so this is interesting. It sets the dominion to it sets the production of Sloth 3. This is actually probably quite useful in the right situation. If you're at war with someone and you know they have like 2 major forts where they're producing a ton of troops, and if you blow 40 earth gems and cast this on both those forts, hell, let's say you have a ton of earth gems, blow 40 casting this on both those forts, then 2 turns later, cast it on both those forts again. If they are playing a nation that has high production costs, this will probably cripple them, honestly, especially if they're normally at like production 3 and you swing them from production 3 to Sloth 3. Their unit recruitment will go straight into the toilet, and if they are in a situation where they have the gold to recruit more units and they can't do it, this is going to give you a huge advantage over them, right? Even if you plan it right, you could even do this, even if you can't prevent them from maxing out their gold income in units per turn. If you can prevent them from recruiting units in convenient locations, they may not be able to get the units in to fight you before you can do a ton of damage by taking their provinces and restricting their income, right? And win by attrition. All right, where were we? Enslaved Mind. Okay, so this is just the same as the charm for... Oh, not quite the same. Okay, so this actually is not as good as Charm, because Charm, I believe, just gets them on your side. This makes them I think feeble-minded, and they just become a regular troop. If it doesn't make them feeble-minded, it might as well, because making a mage a regular troop effective, they can't cast any spells, so might as well. Their fighting ability will be better than if they were feeble-minded, but yeah. So I haven't seen this used to much effect. The key thing here is that it only affects one person. It's magic resistance negates, and you don't get to choose in a battle who it affects unless there's only one person to affect. Now, if you're casting this on the thug, all right, fair enough. Here's the thing, though. It's an astral spell. It takes high amount of astral to cast. Why aren't you casting Soul Slay? You're just going to get the thug as a regular non-commander, so like, who gives a shit, right? Just kill it. Perhaps you could do some shenanigans where you like actually manage to enslave their powerful thug, and then you cast Gift of Reason to turn it back into a thug, and then you have some mage. It's probably going to be a mage, and then you have a mage that has paths you don't usually have access to, and that could be cool. Outside of that, don't see a lot of use for it, honestly. Okay, mine's gradually broken down. Oh yeah. I love the descriptions on these. Like, people of a small village in a remote province will have their minds gradually broken down. When they are entirely lobotomized, their minds will be imprinted with religious zeal towards the rightful pretender god. When the conversion is complete, they will attack the province and attempt to conquer it and serve their god to the best of their abilities. Every pretender god in this fucking game is chaotic evil. Jesus. Many people die. Yeah, so I believe this is kind of nice. It's expensive. I don't know if it's actually worth casting, but essentially what it does is it's gonna kill a bunch of pop. It's gonna be a big pop kill. I believe it'll cause unrest, although I don't recall. And then a force of peasants will attack the local province defense. It's probably gonna fail unless they only have one PD, which could be the case. But even if it does fail, you're going to cause a bunch of damage to the population of the province. A likely use for this, although it costs 25 astral pearls, it's probably not actually worth the cost regardless. But hypothetically, if your opponent has a farmlands, and you know, because you have a scout there, that they only have like 1 PD in that farmlands, you could use this to deny them the income from the farmlands for a couple turns, however long it takes them to get over there and take it back, right? But I'm not a huge fan of those type of spells in general. Okay, Wither Bones. Oh, this is super good, isn't it? This is Dust to Dust, but area of effect 6+ at only Death 3. So this is, again, why Dust to Dust on its own is actually very good. This is why, however, Death Mages are like the ultimate anti-undead. Like this will obliterate undead armies, like 6+ squares of undead per turn. Now, fatigue cost is 50, so probably you need a Death 4 mage or like a Death 3 mage with like the staff to enhance their casting, so that the fatigue cost is more reasonable and you can cast it like 4 times. But supposing you take the staff, then you've got area of effect 7 instead of 6, and you got 4 casts probably, and so you're gonna take out what is that, 28 squares of undead units? Hugely effective. You can probably, if you have access to Death 3 mages to begin with, you can probably kit out 3 or 4 dudes with that, and that is a fuckload of undead. That's like most of the enemy army, just gone, if they have a huge undead army. Very, very effective. So leprosy, I think, I'm not sure how many units it hits in an enemy army, but in general, if you're like, just target the enemy capital, you know, and if you know they've got a big army sitting there waiting to attack you, slap a couple casts of this out on it. Diseased is really good. Diseased is really good. They take 1 hit point per turn that they're alive, so especially if there's going to be a fight like the next turn, it's not that great. But if you expect to fight them in like 5 turns, or if it's going to take them 5 turns to move that army anyway, you just cast this on them, and it's really going to fuck them up, because any of the units that are diseased are probably not going to survive to battle. If they do survive to battle, they'll have lost a lot of their hit points and will die very easily. Even if they do survive the battle, they'll die soon after, and possibly that can be accelerated. If they take some damage and aren't finished off during the combat, they'll die a turn or 2 later, and during this whole time while they're dying, those units are basically already a lost cause, and they will, I think they pick up more afflictions as they go as well, and they'll, well, they have a chance to. They will be costing your opponent income, right? The whole time. I think this can hit commanders as well, which is great, because if you manage to hit like 1 mage, that's a fantastic outcome. Mages are very expensive, mages are very valuable turn-wise, so one of the better like target the enemy and fuck them type spells for only 10 death gems. Let's see. This is actually another just great undead spell, right? Do you care about unrest if you're Airmore? No. Do you care about getting diseased if you're an undead nation? No. I kind of wish there were more undead nations per age. It'd be kind of cool to have a little bit more variety. But anyway, you know, you could throw this on there as well if you have a pretender with a little air magic as any undead nation, or you could even do this if you had like a death pretender as like Pangea, right? Because Pangea, along with some other nations, have like recuperation. If you got recuperation, you don't care about this. It's not a problem for you. I mean, it might be a little bit of a problem for you, but not really. The unrest is probably the only real issue. Let's see. This is area of effect 25. Magic resist negates sleep. This is actually pretty good. I haven't Is this new? I don't think it's new. I don't think it's new, but I've never used it or seen someone else use it. I guess due to a lack of people going up Thaumaturgy with nature magic, right? This is pretty good. Like, it hits 25 squares. It doesn't cost a nature gem to cast. Oh right, it is like, what is that, nature 5? That's probably why. But if you are in a position to cast this, hell yeah, spam the fuck out of this. I would queue this up like 5 times and just let her rip. Even if enemy units have a decent amount of magic resistance, especially if they're size 2 units, right? 3 units per square, 25 squares. Oh, you might, well, you know, only in a big fight would you actually hit every square being a square with units in it, right? But hypothetically, I mean, that's going to be like 75 units that are going to have to make magic resist checks, and probably like a quarter of them will fall asleep. It's pretty good. It's really going to fuck up enemy formations, and if you have if you get several casts of it off, potentially your army is just going to go and start slaughtering all these people who are sound asleep. So yeah. Let's see, beckoning. This one is, I don't really recognize this one. Okay, so this is another like kill enemy soldiers up to 50 effects, huh? 50 effects plus, interesting. It will go into the force. I think this just kills enemy's troops in their camp nature version. These spells, they're not usually very good. What I will say, you can do rituals happen before movement. So if you are about to fight an enemy army and they think they're gonna win, right? You can do something like really dump one of these with one of these spells. Like have 4 mages. Like, I don't know if this is really feasible. It's 5 nature magic, but you could potentially have the ability, especially as like Pangea, have 4 mages just boom, drop this spell, right? The turn that you attack into their army, and you kind of, especially if you expect them to fight and not just like dodge out of the way, and then before they have a chance to like dodge their army back or anything, hopefully what happens is you win the fight pretty badly and kill all their mages, right? Because their army's a lot weaker than they expected. I have seen people actually make use of not beckoning specifically, but other types of spells like this by really just dumping an absurd amount of gems that I wouldn't have expected on this, and then finishing off the enemy mages, because enemy mages are not really going to get hit by this, I believe, because those are strong of mind or duty. So units with high morale, units with high magic resistance. So your commanders are going to have both. I'm not sure if it even targets your commanders, and likely your satyrs and stuff will have both, but it gets you this opportunity to create a situation where you are fighting at a huge advantage, and so your army is going to completely crush theirs and hopefully kill a lot of their really high value units, because a lot of units, if not overwhelmed, will have more value, right? Like suppose if you just like rush over their troops and kill them all before they can finish their casting queue for the mages, especially if you have fast troops available and you plan for this, or, you know, if sacreds get surrounded and cut down before they have opportunities to regenerate, or, you know, whatnot, overwhelming force basically can result in you taking less casualties disproportionate to the amount of units that you took out of the equation. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure I'm alliterating that point too well, but I think you can get the gist of it. So that's what I find useful about those types of spells. All right, so this is the end of part 2. Thank you for watching, and if you like this type of content and want to see more, please subscribe. It does help me out a little bit. That's all.